Welcome to the Jay Kim Show. This is your host, Jay Kim. I am an investor, author, and fitness entrepreneur, and for the first time in Asia, I sit down with the world's most brilliant minds in business, investing, and entrepreneurship. You'll learn all the secrets, strategies, and formulas to becoming a successful entrepreneur directly from the masters. If this is your first time listening, thank you for stopping by. This podcast is produced every week with the goal of providing actionable insight to you, the listener, with every single episode. And now, on to the show. Today's show guest is one of my friends and fellow podcasters here in the trenches in Hong Kong, and his name is Casey Lau. Casey is one of the co-founders of Startups Hong Kong, which is basically the very first startup community that was ever set up in Hong Kong. What started off as a simple meetup group for people in Hong Kong who wanted to learn about startups and early stage investing has grown into becoming the leading platform for startups and entrepreneurs in this city. Casey and his team have done so well, in fact, that they got the attention of the organizers of Web Summit. The organizers there were looking for a venue and a local partner to do a conference in Asia. They chose Hong Kong, and who better to partner up with than the pioneer himself, Casey Lau. Rise is now the largest technology conference in Asia, and they have an amazing lineup of speakers. This week is Rise Week. We have Gary Vaynerchuk, Dave McClure, along with a ton of executives from the top companies such as Grab, Google, Garena, and Razer that are joining us as speakers to the event. So Casey's a great guy, and him and his partner Gene Su are always generously giving to the ecosystem here in Hong Kong. And his work in Hong Kong was an early inspiration for me, actually, because I didn't see any sort of ecosystem here in Hong Kong, which is why I spent a lot of time traveling to Silicon Valley and learning about early stage investing in startups myself. And Casey was the one that basically brought a lot of that culture over to Hong Kong and cultivated the ecosystem here locally. So we have to thank Casey for the great work that he's done here in Hong Kong. Casey also launched his podcast recently, which is called The Risecast, which I'm actually very excited about because, as you know, there's not a lot of high quality podcasts out here in Asia. So to have a fellow podcaster out here in Hong Kong, especially, is very exciting. He has a great show with a lot of high quality guests, a lot of them who I know personally. And so it's been really fun listening to his show. And it's called Risecast. So go over and listen to that. They're all speakers at the Rise conference, which is this week. It's a huge week in Hong Kong. If you haven't done so already, grab your tickets, go over to riseconf.com and check out what all the buzz is. So let's jump right into the show. And I think you're going to enjoy what he has to say about the conference. Casey, thank you so much for coming on the Jay Kim Show. We're very happy to have you.
Thanks, Jay. Glad to be here.
So for the audience that's listening in from outside of Hong Kong, who is Casey Lau and what do you do? I say outside because pretty much everyone in the Hong Kong ecosystem will know who you are. So for our listeners listening in from outside, please give us a quick introduction. Who's Casey Lau? What do you do for a living?
Well, I do a bunch of different things, but I guess the thing that started off in the last few years and kind of gave me some notoriety in the startup world is that myself and three other guys, we started a thing called StartupsHK, which of course stands for Startups Hong Kong. And basically it's a community of startups. And we started this around, I hate to say it, but it was 7 years ago now already, since we're in 2017. So we started in 2010. And actually what happened was that one of the government facilities here called Cyberport held an angel conference in 2010 and invited a guy named Dave McClure. This is before he was 500 Startups. I believe he was managing Facebook's fund.
FP fund, yeah.
Yeah. And so he came to town and he was on stage with a bunch of other Silicon Valley guys talking about startups and all this crazy stuff. And of course, at that time, the people who were going to that, there was an audience of about 200 people already. And everybody read TechCrunch. That was like the thing. And we're reading about these crazy ideas getting funded in Silicon Valley. And we're like, oh man, we want to do that too. So at that conference, somebody asked him, hey, Dave, what should we do once you guys from Silicon Valley go back to the US? You created all this excitement amongst the audience here. What should we do? And I'll never forget this because this is what Dave told me. And every time I talk to Dave, I'll tell him the story, or anybody I meet that knows Dave, I tell him the story. Basically, he said, you guys should get together, meet at a coffee shop, and start your own ecosystem. And that's the first time I ever heard that word outside of like a science class, right? I was always
Yeah,
like,
that's
oh,
right.
really? That's interesting. So, and basically we just did what he said. And then that was it. We never heard from him again until like a couple years later. But basically a bunch of us got together at a coffee shop and we just started talking about startups. So all of us were in the startup, all thinking of ideas. And then it was like a support group, or like I like to tell people, it was like an Alcoholics Anonymous, where we'd all sit in a circle and tell everybody, hey, I'm in a startup. This is what I do.
Yeah,
These are
yeah.
my problems I have right now. Can anybody help me? It
Hi,
was,
Casey.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It was awesome. It was so much fun. And that was the early days. And, we have some pictures I was just sharing on Facebook of those early days not too long ago. And it's funny, like a lot of those people are still in the society, still in the ecosystem. And then some of them have sold their companies. Some of them are still doing their startups. Some have gone back to corporate life, but it's quite interesting to see how far it's come since then. And so Startups HK, has grown from like those five guys at a coffee shop. We have a newsletter and a social media reach of over 10,000 people who are interested in what's happening in Hong Kong. And all we do is it's not a formal company. It's more like a community. So we just put on events all the time. So like at the beginning, people are just hungry for knowledge of how to build their startup, how to get customers, how to find investors and all this kind of stuff, get media exposure. So that's all we did. We put on the first conference back in 2010. So it was called Startup Saturday and it was at Cyberport. And we had like 500 people show up. Microsoft sponsored it, bought lunch for everybody.
Nice.
And it was great. We had we had Douglas Young, the founder of GOD. He was our keynote speaker because he was the only guy we knew that was kind of like doing his own business that was really successful. Wasn't tech related. And then Patrick Lee, I think you've had him on your show before.
Yeah, sure.
So he started Alive Not Dead, of course.
Alive Not Dead, yeah.
And that's from Rotten Tomatoes. And he lived out here. So we had him talk to us. And then we had a couple of guys who've gone on to YC and stuff like that and do some talks. So it was pretty good, pretty exciting. And that's basically that's where it started. And so from there, it just started getting bigger and bigger. We started our own co-workspace in Wan Chai, and it was like a 1,000 square foot place. Again, I never heard this word before. I'm like, why? This is just like an office though, right? An office with no walls. That was what it was. And it smelled funny because nobody really took out the garbage and things like that. And it was just the beginning, but people crammed into that place. We had talks every week. It's just like the beginning. It was really cool. It was like I can imagine it's something like, not like, but something similar to like, when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak went to those, computer shows and showing what they were building with everybody else. That's what it felt like. It felt like something was happening. Just very exciting. And I guess we just caught the wave at the right time as it grew up. So that's kind of what I'm famous for in Hong Kong. And I've been doing that for a little while now. And then, so that kind of led into me being the co-host for the Rise conference, which is probably the biggest tech conference, innovation conference out here in Asia outside of China, as well as working with a company in Hawaii called Blue Startups, which is the startup accelerator, which I'm also working with as an entrepreneur resident and a venture partner.
That's awesome. That's such a cool story about how you guys did Startup Hong Kong. I mean, I remember the ecosystem back then, and there was nothing. It was very nascent, and it was around the same. That's funny because you mentioned seeing Dave here, and then I met him just the year after when he started at 500 in Silicon Valley because I invested in his fund. And basically I went there because there was nothing in Hong Kong. And I was like, okay, well, I am interested in early stage investing, but there's no ecosystem. So I had to fly myself out a couple of times a year to Silicon Valley just to get my education, right?
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I don't know if I've ever asked you this. What did you do before Startups HK?
Well, I guess the way that I actually got into all this is that I actually did my own startup back when they were called .coms. So I've been doing this for a long, long time. I started when I was really young. And basically, I guess, so you could say I was one of the pioneers at the original time, like the dinosaur time of this kind of technology world. So I had an e-commerce startup. It was called actionace.com. And basically, when I first came to Hong Kong, I started a web design company that we designed websites for people back when, before Flash was even out, right? So it's just HTML websites. People wanted websites, and people used to ask us after we built their website, how do we make money off this? We just paid you guys like a ton of money to make this. How are we supposed to make money? And we said that was our number one thing. Amazon was starting out. We're like, you should start e-commerce, start selling things online. That was our advice. That's how high tech we were back then, right? And they're like, okay, how do we do that? We're like, yeah, exactly. How do you do that? We don't know. Right? There's no Shopify. There's no
Oh yeah.
Facebook. There's nothing like this to help you to, sell anything. I think eBay hadn't come out or it's just coming out at this time
No, yeah,
as
yeah.
well. Yeah. So basically we built an e-commerce engine. So we were one of the first e-commerce sites based out of Hong Kong. And what we did is we sold toys to the world. And of course they weren't just normal toys. Like they weren't like, little kids toys. These are collector toys. So we sold, and this was back in 97. So this was also the re-release of the Star Wars films. So they did these
Oh
things called
yeah.
special editions where they
Yeah,
redid all the
yeah, yeah.
special effects. And so, of course, the people who are little kids when it came out are now adults and have money to buy their own TIE fighters and lightsabers and things like that, right? So that's what we did. We used the internet to sell that stuff out to around the world because being here in Hong Kong, the toys would come out made in China. They'd come
Yeah.
to Hong Kong and then they ship out to LA for, exposure across the US, right? So we did them first and people would use the internet to buy them and order them with FedEx. So they'd have them first and they'd be worth like lots of money because collectors were crazy and rich, so they wanted to buy them.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the web 1.0 years, it's so funny thinking back then. I mean, I never worked for like a web company in the 1.0 years, but I remember when I first learned HTML and it took me, and when Flash came out, I was like, oh my God, this is a game changer, you know? And I think I holed up for a weekend, me and my buddy, and made our first Flash website. Like it was just like a landing page or something. And it took us a whole weekend. And then obviously Flash doesn't exist anymore, but
yeah,
those were fun days. Let's see. So fast forward. So Startups HK. Now Startups HK is literally, I mean, it's not like there's no revenue model. It's just literally just a organization where you were just serving the audience here, right?
correct.
Yeah, and so I think that's great because I think that here's the problem. So I have a banking background, finance, and the finance the finance industry is sort of built around this mentality of scarcity where all you're doing is trying to make the most money. And it's everything from having a client, it's how much can you charge them to trade with you, or how much fees can you charge for this investment banking transaction? And it's so based on scarcity that people coming out of that model, they don't think about anyone but themselves. And so to tell someone from that background, oh, you have to go now and do something for free, they'd be like, what are you talking about? What do I get out of it, right? So I think that's great that you set out that way, and you planted the flagpole, Startups HK, and it's actually grown, and now it's probably it's given you a lot in return, maybe not necessarily directly financially, but by way of networking and
Oh yeah,
and
definitely.
whatnot.
And you mentioned like the banking angle, which is true, but actually in Hong Kong, at the time that I've been here, it's a very, commerce driven city, right? Nobody in any industry would help you to succeed here, right? So if you were in banking, real estate, or anything where there was money to be made, you're on your own, right? You would never really learn. So when we started talking to startups and helping them for free, of course, yeah, everyone was shocked. Why would you do this for free? And also people would try to get us to sign NDAs before they told us their
Right.
ideas. Things like that. Like if everyone's like, oh my God, they're going to steal because this, I don't know what it's like in the States because, we didn't really do this in the US, but in Asia, it's like, that's definitely a big thing. Like only recently, I think people started to let go on that because people found out, oh, it's just an idea. It's like the execution is the most important part. But back then it was like, oh, you want to sell like dog products online? I can't tell you the whole story because you're going to steal it from me because,
Yeah.
it's such a great idea and nobody else can do it except for me. Right.
So
So
funny.
yeah, exactly. Right. So that was the one thing that I think that I really love to see change in Hong Kong, especially is to see people who would normally not give their time for free, giving their time for free and mentoring startups and coming out to talks. I mean, we're getting people that are not necessarily in technology. So, because it seems like in the technology world, everybody's like already, yeah, no problem. I'll come out and do a talk. Like, I still remember we did our second Startup Saturday and Brian Chesky from Airbnb was in town for another conference. And I got him in the bathroom at the Grand Hyatt and said, hey, we're doing another conference this weekend. If you're still here, I'd love for you to come out and just say hi to everybody. And he's like, I don't know. But then he showed up
No
and
way.
he blew everybody away with the whole story of how he came up with this thing. And it was like a
Nice.
standing ovation moment. It was like crazy. People were going absolutely nuts. So I'll never forget something like that, right? Now today he's like, Airbnb's massive. Back then it was still just starting off, right? But it was just that founders have that kind of openness to just kind of share about all the mistakes, because, all the stuff they made with the cereal and everything like that, all the problem, they ran out of money and all this crazy stuff. Who would share a failure story as well? Especially in Asia, nobody would tell you, yeah, I did some stupid stuff. Everybody here wants to look cool, smart, and I never made a mistake, right? And they want to charge for it, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
so the whole startup world is just like, I think it's really, really changed a lot of people's mind in Asia. And I think that is one, if anything else, that has been its number one thing that it's done.
So we've both been sort of along the ride and seen the changes that have happened. Can you talk to the audience a little bit about the current state of the Hong Kong ecosystem versus, I think it's pretty well known that it was nascent. There was nothing back when you started 2009-ish. Fast forward to today, there's something like over 50 co-work / accelerator, pre-accelerated spaces. There's a number of more prominent VCs that are actually actively investing in startups. There's 5,000, whatever, 2,000 startups, homegrown startups in the ecosystem. The government is obviously trying to support as much as possible, as well as the corporate sector. Places like KPMG is very, E&Y is very heavily involved, and Blueprint and spaces like that. So where do you see, what's the current state, and what are the challenges that still exist in Hong Kong that we're facing on a daily basis?
Well, I think that obviously, it's come a long way. And I think that a lot of the stuff that's happened in Hong Kong have been thanks to expats coming into the market here, right? I think that is something that a lot of people looking out or looking in from outside, not knowing. It's like the Hive was the main co-work space, the serious one. Like, we started the first one, but that wasn't really a serious one. Like, the Hive came in and kind of showed everybody, like, this is what a co-work space is. It's like high end, it's expensive, it's got hosts, it's got free coffee, it's got open spaces, it's got networking areas, it's got a community, it's got all these things. And so Constant, who's the founder of that, he came out from the UK here and brought his whole family here and decided to jump into this whole new world. Like, I'm not sure he has a video game background, so he's not even in from this background, but he brought his whole family out here to build this. And I think when people saw that, they're like, oh, what is this? This is interesting. Because I think all those old places like the Reguses and these kind of business centers that are like white walls, and they charge you for everything you touch in the room, right? And this is like a disruptor in that kind of world. And as you know, in Hong Kong, there's tons of transient people that come back and forth out of here from Europe, from the US, doing business, trading in China, whatever, right? So why not have these kind of places where people can meet, and it's not such a drudge of life to get come through Hong Kong all the time. So I think that that's one of the things about the co-work space that's set up. And of course, as you know, right, Hong Kong's property, there's like, I'm looking out the window right now and I see tons of empty floors in Quarry Bay here that I'm sure somebody's thinking about turning into a co-work space. All right. Yeah. I think today somebody told me one of the entertainment companies, EEG, is opening a co-work space now.
Oh, right? Wow. So, interesting.
Yeah, there's all kinds of co-work space here. So, I mean, but that's great, right? There's a co-work space. There's a cooking co-work space now. I think there's a couple of them actually have opened up. And so I see this as a great way to start, just bringing ideas together. And that's what Hong Kong desperately needs, is a place for people to come to with ideas and meet people who are in similar worlds that don't know each other. And hopefully they can work together and create something cool.
Yeah. There's an ongoing sort of debate, I mean, amongst the people in Hong Kong and those outside. And it's talking about Hong Kong's competitiveness as a place to build a company, to start a company. And you have this backdrop, you're just talking about property. You have this backdrop of the ridiculously, high property prices that almost weed out a lot of the weaker players. And as a startup, you're scrapping pretty hard for survival. And so the last thing you want to have to do is to pay high rent, right? And so if you have a nice co-working space that you can go into that somewhat accommodative on pricing, then that will prolong at least your runway for a bit. And then we have this whole thing of, okay, Hong Kong itself is losing its competitive edge to China, to maybe Shenzhen, financially to maybe Shanghai. How do you see Hong Kong as a competitive city to build a company, to start up? And where do you see the most opportunity for growth in our region?
Okay, so I want to preface this with saying that I have actually traveled to a lot of the startup ecosystems in Asia over the last few years. So
Okay.
I've been to Japan, I've been in Korea, I've been in Singapore, I've been to Malaysia, I've been in China, Taiwan, everywhere I've seen what's happening. So I have a I wouldn't say an expert understanding of the whole market here, but I would say that I'm looking at it enough that I can see what's building and where the markets are happening. So, and of course, but I do live in Hong Kong part of the time of the year now. So, and I have been here for a while, and we have StartupsHK. So people might say I think whatever I say is a bit biased, but I try not to be, because I don't want to. That's one of the reasons why we're very agnostic. That's one thing I like. We love all the co-work spaces, and we're not like on anyone's team. We're just happy that they're all there. We're happy that there's investors here. We're happy that everybody's here. And so we don't want to like choose sides or pick sides on anything, right? That's the main point. I think why we're well known is because we just help everybody, right? As long as they're on the level, we want to help them. So looking at the landscape in Asia, I'm definitely seeing that Hong Kong is one of the best places in Asia to do a startup. All right.
Wow. Okay.
And so why is that, right? Okay. If you're going to talk about property prices and rents, yes. But I don't know if you've been to San Francisco lately, but it is super expensive. And I went to Honolulu, and it is also super expensive in Honolulu. And Honolulu isn't as obviously connected as Hong Kong or San Francisco is, right? So people just want to live there. I'm originally from Vancouver. Vancouver prices are out of control. Everybody wants to live in places that are awesome, right? So Hong Kong is one of those places. But of course, you can live here without totally being gouged, right? And we have an amazing transportation system and stuff like that. So I even lived in the new territories for a while, right? And I didn't find it like that, oh my God, it's just so far away to get to Central or whatever, right? So I really didn't think that those are the things that, maybe if you had to drive from, East Bay to downtown San Francisco every day, maybe that might drive you a little crazy. Or if you're in LA, you got to drive across LA, of course that would drive you a little crazy. But Hong Kong I find that the transportation system is fantastic. I also find that remembering the rest of Asia is not as open to expats as Singapore and Hong Kong are, right? So when you come here, you do get a mixture of different people. I mean, I've met people from around the world doing startups in Hong Kong, but I go to like Seoul and it's mostly Korean people doing startups in Seoul, right? I go to Japan, I met one or two Western founders there. And I was surprised that they were doing the startups in Japan for the Japanese market, right? So I find that to be challenging. If you're a westernized person, European person going into China, wow, I think that's you're pretty brave to try and tackle that market without a full understanding of the market or somebody really Chinese on your team, right? So if you're if you're doing startup, Hong Kong or Singapore, okay, I'm going to say Singapore to a little bit degree because they are the easiest drops for different kinds of people, and I think you need to have that mix, right? The U.S. market, people always say U.S. Americans. It's not really, right? You go to Silicon Valley, there's people from Russia there. There's people from all over the world mixing together with their ideas. And that's why the ideas are so great there because there's all these different people from India, from Asia, from Europe, everywhere mixed together in Silicon Valley. It's like the place to be, right? So same with Asia. You'd have to look for those places. People love China. China has a huge number of people, but nobody wants to live there, right? I mean, the lifestyle, the air pollution, there's all these things that people are like, I just can't handle this. The slow internet is another big thing, right? If you're building a global business, how can you do that out of China, right? It's just impossible. If you're building it for China, great, good for you. That you should be in China and doing it inside China. But coming out and trying to take care of Asia from Hong Kong or Singapore, these are the places I would definitely think are going to be the places. And then the last thing about that is, the community and ecosystem. Ecosystem's not just, investors and startups and developers and creative people. It's actually the city in general, right? Why is Rise in Hong Kong, right? Singapore, honestly, I would actually love to have Rise in Singapore, right? Because it would bring a lot. But the thing is, Hong Kong has a lot of things that Singapore doesn't have, and a lot of things that Taipei doesn't have. It's a place where people can easily assimilate into and easily get around. These are the great things about it. So there's great coffee shops, great restaurants. There's all kinds of stuff going on here, right? You live here. I think you understand what I'm saying, right? It's not, it's just like the whole package rather than just one piece of the package. So, Absolutely. But in the future though, I see that whichever city can build the best talent factory or talent attractor magnet, that city will win. So Singapore is doing a very good job with that, making it very easy for people to move there, open offices there, tax subsidies, all this kind of stuff, nice housing, schooling for kids, all these kind of things will definitely help Singapore to attract talent. But then once they get there, you know, is it deep? Is it deep enough for these people to appreciate, right? When people come in for Rise, one of the things I always say is Hong Kong has this really cool, like, edgy feel. It's like kind of modern, but it's also kind of old. And so it's kind of like a New York more than like a Silicon Valley or like an LA. It's kind of more, you know, it's got this special feel to it. And a lot of people like that kind of thing. Where in Singapore, it's a little bit too clean. That's the word I'm going to use. Yeah. Okay.
It's a little sterile. I mean, I think Hong Kong also has a very unique landscape. You know, I mean, having mountains and, you know, a bay and harbor, water and mountain, it's quite rare. I mean, there's not a lot of cities in the world that are made up like this. So let's say I'm an investor from the US I'm an investor from the US and I'm coming to Hong Kong for the first time. I want to get my boots dirty. I want to see what's going on. From as agnostic of a view as possible, where are the hotspots that I should be hitting in addition to Rise, which is probably the largest tech conference in Hong Kong? What other areas, locations, co-work spaces, communities, organizations, events should I check out if I just want to get a feel for what the startup scene's like in Hong Kong?
Well, in Hong Kong, yeah. Well, Rise is only once a year, so that comes in like a atom bomb, explodes, and brings everybody from around the region all over the world to see what is going on in Asia, but based out of Hong Kong, right? But during the rest of the year, there's so much stuff going on here that it's hard to keep track of everything. So, you know, so the Hive has a bunch of locations with a bunch of different stuff going on. There's Garage Society. They have a bunch of stuff going on. They have a bunch of different venues now that have different events going on. They have a calendar on their website and in their offices. And I'm just like, wow, there's so much stuff going on. There's like 2 or 3 things going on. General Assembly's teaching classes here. You know, there's just like, so now everybody's trying to define a vertical, right? So this is the main point. Otherwise, you're just going to go into these, because when we started, it was easy just to do general, you know, how to raise money and, you know, how to hire people and just like the basic stuff. And everybody would come out because that was the thing. Now it's places like Meta and Central might focus more on fintech, right? And Brink, also in Central, focuses on hardware and IoT. So now it's becoming completely siloed, which is great, because I think that, you know, building tribes in these different verticals is very important. And so when people come to town, I know, okay, that's the guy I talk to. Bay McLaughlin, he's the guy for hardware. Go talk to him, right? If you want to talk to the people at Meta and expose yourself to that community, Tony Verb, he's the guy, right? So I'm so happy that, because if I was the only guy that was doing all this, I would say we failed hugely, right? Now we have like dozens of people out there doing stuff, and you're doing a podcast now, interviewing people from here. I'm doing a podcast. So we all have these people that are saying different things and are all like leaders and know different people that can help other people connect into the ecosystem, right? And I think that if I was to say, tell me who those people are in, say, Tokyo, I may be a little bit hard to tell you who those people are, right? If I said, who's the leader guy that does this, this, and this, it'd be a little bit hard. That's why I think in Hong Kong it's great, because if I don't know the guy, I know the guy who does know the guy. Right?
That's true.
So, and same with you, right? And same as Bay. And Bay needs to introduce, or even the government, right? The StartupsHK arm that does a lot of this stuff. They know everybody as well. So they're able to point the guy in the right direction. So when they come to Hong Kong, no time wasted. I can make these connections to you before you land. And then boom, you have 3 days of amazing meetings, meeting the right people, and then off you go. Or you move into Hong Kong next, whatever.
That's actually a good point. I mean, I was one of the first things that I realized when I moved to Hong Kong back in 2005 was how, despite it being a major city with 7 million people, how close and how small it actually was. And I don't know if it's just because I was an expat and the circles that I hung out with, but it just felt like it is exactly what you said. If I didn't have direct access to someone, I knew someone that had direct access to that person that I wanted to meet. So it's definitely a very good place to accelerate, you know, your company or your networking, if that's what you want to do. Let's take a moment and talk about Rise. It's coming up soon, and it'll be It's, like you said, the biggest tech event in Asia. What do we have to look forward to this year at Rise?
Well, okay, so it's going to be July 11th, 12th, and 13th at the Hong Kong Convention Exhibition Center, which is the right in the middle of the city, and which is great. And it's in a bigger section of the convention center this year. We're expecting 15,000 people this year, so
Wow.
it's been doubling every year, which is great. And I mean, it's going to be a lot of the same stuff, but just amped up again, right? So we have an amazing speakers coming in from around the world, which I'm very excited to be helping the speakers team this year, getting a lot more big names from Hong Kong up on stage, but they're bringing in people from the US and Europe, all over. We got a lot of Chinese speakers too, which is very exciting. They are coming out of China to Hong Kong and talk about what's going on in the mainland market, which I think is great because a lot of people want to come out and listen to this, and we're going to bring them to Hong Kong to speak. And of course, we get the startup booths. We've got and I don't know if have you been to Rise in the past?
Yeah.
So one of the things I like about this event is that, okay, and remember everybody who's listening is that this is not my event. This is the brainchild of Paddy Cosgrave in Dublin, Ireland, who created the Web Summit. And this show is like 60,000 plus people in Lisbon in November, right? It's like the third biggest technology show now in the world. And he happened to choose Hong Kong as the location for the Asia show, which he's called Rise. Right now they're in New Orleans with Collision, which is their US show, and we're going to do an Indian show next year called Surge. So that's specifically for the India market. Yeah, it's exciting.
That's
so we're
awesome.
expanding out. They each have their own names, and basically Patty chooses a co-host in every city to be like the guy on the ground that kind of helps to, cull the community together and open the door for all the guests that are coming in. Basically, all the attendees are guests at this giant party that he's throwing around the celebration of technology and innovation and just exciting stuff that's happening, right? So it's kind of like, and so when you go to this thing, I've been to a lot of different conferences in Asia, and basically, they follow a similar format. There's talks on the stage, and then there's startup booths, and then that's it. Basically, you make your way through it. Hopefully, you can get attention of somebody you want, or you find somebody you're looking for. It's not very organized because it's not usually run by conference people. It's run by maybe a blog or somebody who's not really, or an event company that's not really in startup events. Right. So they kind of run it like a trade show, which is not what it is either, right? So Web Summit runs Rise like a networking event on steroids, right? Basically, people are coming in. If you're an investor and you come in with an investor badge, you're not just like there's a special lounge for you. You tell us like, I want to meet early stage fintech companies that are concentrating on blockchain, and then we set those meetings for you, so you don't have to wander around aimlessly through the stuff, right? A lot of the speakers come because they want to meet the other speakers, right? And then we have all these speaker dinners. We have pub crawls. There's just a lot. And then last year, we're going to do it again. We're doing Startup Drive, where we have a bunch of Teslas with investors inside. And then startups can sign up to take a drive around Hong Kong and pitch them an idea within 30 minutes. And if they don't like them, they just get left on the corner on the street. No, they get sent back to the main location. But I was thinking, we should just do that.
That would be awesome.
Just pick up random startups on the street and let them pitch inside. We're doing Startup Ferry, so we rent out the Star Ferry and we put a bunch of beer on there with a bunch of startups, take them around the harbor because that's one of the great things about Hong Kong. Again, it's like we have so many of these cool things that are part of the city's character, right? That add to this thing. And a lot of people have never been to Hong Kong for an event because we don't have these kind of shows here, right? They're mostly these trade shows that are done by the TDC that are like, meet vendors from China. Like this is the kind of usual trade shows that are done here. So this kind of party atmosphere conference is not something normal, but Hong Kong is totally set up for this kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it's great. I mean, when you go to, you and I have both been to tons of conferences, and it's very rare that I plan a longer than the actual conference to stay in a city. But that's exactly what people do when they come to Rise. Is they make a week or a weekend or a full week out of it with weekends bookending it. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was what I really appreciated about Rise was, as you said, it's like a tech company. It's like a startup that does it. And so the communication, like the app and that functionality is just so slick. Yeah. When I signed up last year and I came in with an investor badge or whatever, and it was literally like you could message, like people were messaging me and saying, "Oh, let's meet up in the coffee corner and let's talk," you know, and they're pitching ideas, and it was the most slick sort of conference interface that I've ever been a part of. And it was so cool that it was just, you know, in the same city that I lived in. So it's awesome to see.
Yeah, thank you. I really like that too. I think that the interaction level is very exciting. But the only thing is that once it gets bigger and bigger, it's gonna, you know, the focus and the noise level also grows with it. So how do you stand out? How do you make the most of your time while you're there, that you're meeting the right people? You know, there's a lot of different factors that we have to look at when we're scaling these conferences even bigger and bigger. So, I mean, they did a great job of it in Lisbon, because I felt like there was a lot of stuff going on, but it wasn't disorganized. It was absolutely like everything was in its place. You just have to make sure you follow the tracks that you're interested in. They started naming all the stages, so you can follow that stage throughout 3 days. So if you're like only into e-commerce or data science, you could just follow that. We have an auto tech stage this year. So like people like Uber and Volvo and these kind of companies will be talking about the future of that. But you can follow those speakers around the different speaking places and the startups, so that you only follow that if that's what you're into, right?
Right. That's awesome. So let's talk about your podcast, man. You know, as a fellow podcaster, I'm so excited that we actually have.
I know we had no podcast before. Now we have a bunch of podcasts now.
Exactly. I love it. So tell us about your podcast, the Risecast.
Risecast. Well, no, it's just like I just listen to a lot of podcasts now. I don't know why. All of a sudden, the content that's coming on podcasts is incredible. You know, I'm a big fan of Walt Mossberg, who's been to Hong Kong. I've interviewed him. I've hung out with the guy, and Kara Swisher, and they do these amazing podcasts over Recode. All their people there, Peter Kafka and stuff like that. I just listen to them. I'm like, wow, these are just amazing, and they find speakers that are just. They have something interesting to say too. They have a unique perspective. Like sometimes I've never heard the name, but I listen to it and it's like, wow, this is so interesting. So because of that kind of content, I wanted to contribute to it. And plus, you know, I don't know about you, but I feel like a lot of people I just know, and they're like my friends. So I'm like, who cares, right? But then I tell somebody normal that doesn't know that person that I know them, and they're like, oh, you know that guy? That's amazing. And I'm like, yeah, you know, that is kind of amazing. I guess I should share that I know that guy or that person, and kind of put them on and kind of actually record it. Because that's another thing. Of all these events I told you at the beginning that we did for StartupsHK, we didn't record any of them, because I was always like more in the moment, right? Like let's you have to be there to be there. It's like a concert. You can't film this. You got to be there, right? It's exciting that way. And who knows what somebody's going to say, right?
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking, you know, I should start recording these and kind of like. Then look back at these like in a few years, and then the guys who I'm interviewing are look back and go, oh yeah, that's weird. I said that 5 years ago or whatever, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. And it's exciting when I'm just hoping that one of the people that either of us interview become like the next, you know, unicorn $1 billion exit guy or whoever, the next Zuck or something like that. And it'd be like, oh yeah, I had him on my podcast when he was like a pre-seed startup founder.
Well, from my podcast, I'm trying to interview the speakers that will be at Rise, and because they're only on stage for 20 minutes, right? And they may do 2 or 3 different sessions, but they'll only be talking about a specific topic. They may be on a panel, and they're not really given any time to like, you should know who they are kind of thing. So my podcast is trying to give people a little bit more insight into who they are, what they like, so that when you meet them, you listen to podcasts, you can like strike up a conversation that isn't more organic than, hey man, do you have some money for my startup? Or, you know, do you publish my game or whatever? It's more like, oh, I heard your podcast and you said this and I thought this is interesting. You know, that's kind of things that I like to hear. And when people talk to me, right, when they say, oh, I read the story, you said this, or I heard you say this. And so I'm thinking, oh, these people are at least sound like they're interested in, you know, what I'm doing. And so I would, you know, that means they've done their homework kind of thing. And and also doing the podcast is fun, just like reading up on my friends. And I'm like, I haven't seen this guy in a while. I read some stories on him. I'm like, hey, this is interesting. I want to see what he's talking about. And then he'll tell me more in depth. And since we know, and also I don't know about you, but when you know the person, I feel like it's much more fun because I kind of know the answers, but and I know what I want them to say. So I kind of guide them through the questions that will deliver those answers, because I know the audience will be like, whoa, that's cool.
Yeah. It's definitely, if you know the person, at least, you know, you're comfortable speaking with them, it makes for a much more engaging and fun conversation, really. And, You know what I've noticed is that I know that you do yours in person, and I do mostly overseas, so it's on Skype calls. But the in-person ones that I have done, which are a handful, it's a whole different dynamic, and it's actually much more engaging, and I really enjoy it much more. So I can see why you do yours strictly in person. So that's awesome. So that's great, man. I hope that we can help you promote your podcast, and I'm happy that we have a couple new high quality podcasts hitting the Asian circuit. I gotta look to wrap up here, but I want to just end with a couple questions. So as someone that is sort of seasoned and deeply entrenched in the startup community here in Hong Kong, and also an investor, with your early stage investing and entrepreneurship in residence at your fund, what sort of piece of advice, if there's one piece of advice that you could tell to a startup founder, an aspiring entrepreneur that is maybe starting their company, or they've just done a seed round in Hong Kong and they're looking to scale up, what's one sort of piece of advice that you could give them that you've seen can help them along the way, given your experience?
Well, I mean, to me, I think the best thing is just to give back. I think that's the most important thing. So whenever somebody raises some money, we always get them to write a post or do something or tell us a little bit of the tricks of how they did it. Right. And so we can share with everybody. So I always feel like that's the one thing. Like, so, I mean, there's no one magic bullet, I guess you would say. I mean, I think that's what you're asking me, right? You want me to give you one piece of advice I would say that you might use for your startup, but I think that's impossible. What I think is that as soon as you raise that money, and I think that most of the startups in Hong Kong that we know, and then the ones that I know personally and through StartupsHK, they've all done this, is that they've come out and told their story. Like, this is how long it took us to raise this 300K or the 6 million or whatever, and are very open about that and sharing. And that is what I feel is the most important part, because the whole ecosystem together needs to grow and learn together. And the only way we're going to do that is if people share what they've learned, right? And like in Silicon Valley, that's like a normal thing. But here, it's not necessarily that way, right? I get a lot of startups out there that are raising money by, mystery investors and undisclosed terms and all these kind of stuff that it's like, come on, this is not a guessing game. This is not it sounds like you're doing something illegal, right? And then like your guest last week, James Giancotti. Okay, yeah, sure. It's a huge score for a Series A, $6 million. He's very happy about that, I'm sure. But, going out there, writing posts, telling everybody about how he raised it, he's not showing off. He's just telling, this is how I did it. This is what we're building. It's a unique product for the market here that's needed, right? And there's people that believe in what they're building. Great. Right? I think that's great. And I think that we need to see that, right? Because I think people are looking at like the wrong things. They're looking at like Uber. Oh, ride sharing. Yeah, let's do that. That's got billions of dollars. We should just copy that. It's like, I think we've got enough of those. We don't need those anymore, right? And then now people are copying all kinds of stuff from China now. And it's just like, it's getting a little bit out of control. We need to see innovation. We need to see things that are going to disrupt. These are the things, well, these are the things I'm interested in, right? Seeing things like renting bicycles, that's not a thing to me, right? But talking about, artificial intelligence and VR and, disrupting, data science and things like that, and using technology to help grow businesses. I think this is the exciting part. Yeah. And if you're doing that in Hong Kong, you should be screaming about what you're doing on top of the rooftop, let people know, hey, this is what we're doing. We got money for this. This is a real thing, not just another frivolous, weird app that does something weird, right? This is like real business. It's going to change Hong Kong. It's going to change Asia.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing about the podcast is another outlet for us to actually help celebrate some of those homegrown wins. So I think it's a great asset for us to have as a community. What any goals that you have, either personal or professional, for this year, for 2017, Casey?
I don't have any personal goals for that short period of time. I guess most important thing is I'm always looking to see how I can push the needle forward in this whole startup world, technology, innovation stuff. Right now I'm thinking Rise is the most amplified way to do that. Even working with startups in Hawaii, the Blue Startups program, accelerator program, we're looking to bring those programs out here to Asia. I think these are like the things that I'm working on that I'm enjoying. And these are the things I think other people need to do as well. Not just crazy people like myself, but more corporates should be out there, sharing what they're doing. I saw that the new media has an accelerator as well now, right? Like a digital media
Yeah, I
one.
just heard that too.
So that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, I like to hear that. I think I heard another unusual vertical has an accelerator. Lane Crawford has an accelerator.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, this is what I'd like to see. I mean, and I love to help those people out. They need help. Anybody has questions about this kind of stuff, definitely feel free to reach out, because I definitely think that all these things are great. And the more open it is and the more exchange of ideas, I think this is what I'm about. This is what I think is the best thing about having this position and having this kind of, I guess, brand, you would call it, in the marketplace. So, and I want to be able to use it to help people who want to live out their dreams.
That's awesome. So where can people find you, follow you, connect with you, and subscribe to your podcast?
Okay, so I guess I'm mostly on Twitter. I love Twitter, and I hope it doesn't die, and I can see people not using it anymore. I feel really sad, but I love Twitter. I've used it for so long. I've met so many great people on Twitter. I've built my whole brand on Twitter because, because people, you can't see me on Facebook, but you can see me on Twitter. If you're from San Francisco, you can see what's going on in Hong Kong by following me. So at Casey_Lau is my Twitter, and I mostly post about stuff about startup stuff, and mostly, of course, stuff about Rise and what I'm doing. But that's the best way to get hold of me. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on every social network, but I'm trying to cut down.
Right.
So I'm trying to say, okay, LinkedIn and Twitter will be like the main things that we use. And I try to forget the rest of them because it's getting hard to, all the noise coming in from all different angles is too much. But I'm kind of like addicted to it, right? You got to try and balance out the life a little bit to not use it so much.
It's tough. I get overwhelmed as well. And what about the podcast? So it's Risecast. You're on iTunes and Stitcher.
So what I found is that if you go to iTunes podcast app and search for Rise Conf, CONF, you'll find it.
Okay.
You'll find it there, and then that Rise Conf will work on Stitcher and all the other podcast apps for iPhone or Android or wherever. We're on SoundCloud. We're on like everything now, but definitely, I mean, I listen to it on iTunes. I listen to yours on iTunes as well. So it just seems the easiest one. They just all come in there automatically.
Yeah, it's the best. It's the best one and the most used actually by stats. Yeah. And if someone wants to buy a ticket to Rise, it's just, I guess you just Google Rise Conference Asia, I guess.
RiseConf.com. And yeah, the tickets are still on. I think still on early bird right now. So that's definitely a way to get there.
Awesome. Well, dude, thanks so much for being on the show. It's great to have you on and share some of your insights, and for all the stuff that you do in Hong Kong for the ecosystem. We obviously thank you, and we're looking forward to hearing more of your Risecast episodes and seeing you at Rise. So thanks a lot, Casey. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot, Jay.
All right, take care. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. All the show notes and links can be found over at jkimshow.com. Come back often and make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Don't forget to join us next week for another exciting episode of The Jay Kim Show. I'd love to hear your comments. You can find me on Twitter at jaykimmer, JAYKIMMER. See you guys next week. This podcast is brought to you by Hack Your Fitness, the high achiever's guide to getting ripped in under 3 hours a week. If you're anything like me, you're probably working a full-time job or jobs and trying to find time to balance family life, social life, and last but not least, fitness. Look, I get it. I'm a full-time investor and entrepreneur myself, and father of two. So how am I able to stay fit year-round without spending hours and hours in the gym killing myself on the cardio machine? After struggling for the last 15 years trying every workout and diet under the sun, I finally designed a system that allows me to achieve and maintain single-digit body fat for life in under 3 hours a week. Cardio not required. Head on over to hackyour.fitness and download my free 13-page guide that teaches you the simple science behind efficient fitness and smart nutrition and gives you everything you need to know to finally take control of your life. That's hackyour.fitness.